Hello, Fearless Schools podcast friends. Have you checked your clock lately? Because you know what time it is. It's time for another exciting plate full of educational learning on the Fearless Schools podcast. And it's all brought to you by the unflappable force at Creative Leadership Solutions. That's right. CLS has the vim, vigor, and sustenance to satisfy anyone's educational appetite. Don't just take my word for it, though. Go to www.creativeleadership.net on the internet and check them out for yourself. You will not be disappointed. And you also won't be disappointed in this Fearless Schools podcast, where we continue to yank back the curtains on all things education as we promise bold topics, big questions, great guests, innovative yet practical solutions, and much more. I'm Dr. Drew Tomlin, as your humble podcast host and current administrator with 30 plus years experience in the schoolhouse. I know something about you. No, don't be nervous. I know that you need the most savory and useful solutions on your leadership menu. All right. And hey, we can't forget about another person who's working diligently in the CLS kitchen, someone who never shies away from a bold pedagogical recipe. He's creative. He's a leader. He's got solutions. He's definitely fearless. He's educational researcher extraordinaire, Dr. Doug Reeves, with another ladle full of learning with a segment we lovingly call Leave It to Reeves. Take it away, Dr. Reeves.
I want to talk about how to grow the next generation of superintendents. And the first thing we have to do is to make sure that we have a wider pool. Right now, although women are more than 70% of the labor pool in schools, only 24% of the superintendents are women. So I wrote this article for the American School Board Journal, and I interviewed women superintendents. Here's what they said. They have to have visibility. So they had superintendents who did not hog the microphone at board meetings, but rather they were able to present themselves to the school board so the board was able to see women in responsible leadership positions. It wasn't just at board meetings, however. They also said they had to be leaders in the community. That means even though everybody wants the superintendent to be on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club and so on, that's not what happened in these cases. The women were able to be out in the community showing that they had leadership skills as well. And it made a clear impression that the community saw them as leaders. Next, they were able to have jobs that were accessible. Too often, women are asked questions that men are not asked, like how will you balance your family? Men don't get asked those questions, but women do. If we want to have a broader pool of superintendents in the future, we have to make the job accessible. And that means that it's not 24/7. It means that they can have time for family, and we've got to make sure that we do not ask inappropriate questions of women in the interview process. And finally, we have to draw strict boundaries. What has happened in the last few years, particularly in public comment period, is that superintendents have been ravaged by criticism. Criticism is not a problem, but threats to family, threats to we know where you live, we're going to follow you to your car and publish your family pictures on social media, that's where you got to draw the line. So what we as leaders and teachers and board members need to do is to have very clear boundaries that protect superintendents and superintendent candidates from that sort of public abuse. If you want to have a broader pool and you want that to include both men and women, that's what we've got to be able to do.
Thanks again, Dr. Reeves. Well, Fearless Schools podcast listeners, I hope you're hungry for a good time and for some good learning too, because this edition of the Fearless podcast is going to bring both of those critical ingredients to the recipe. We're about to embark on the second part of a two-part podcast journey about surviving the superintendency. The first part featured the wise insights of Dr. Peter Noonan, so be sure to check that out if you haven't done so already. And today, on part two of this conversation, we're going to feature the equally wise thoughts and certainly wonderful wit as well of someone that I have known for about a minute or two. This extraordinary school leader is the superintendent of schools for the Metropolitan School District in Washington Township in Indianapolis, a K-12 public school district with over 12,000 students and nearly 1,600 employees. The vision for her leadership is to ensure equitable, affirming, and responsive schools as measured by achievement growth of students. Prior to the superintendency, she served in several areas in education, including teacher, special education program manager, assistant principal, principal, director of communications, director of staff development, director of continuous improvement, and assistant superintendent. Oh my gosh. All of her positions have been in large urban public school districts in the Indianapolis area. She's also served as a board member of the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Home, Young Audiences of Indiana, IUPUI Collegiate Board of Advisors, and IHSAA Foundation, and a national board member of Challenge Day. She has served on both the regional and head council of the IB Board of Governors, and President Obama himself invited her to a day at the White House in 2014 as one of 100 superintendents chosen nationwide to the first ever Future Ready White House Summit. Oh my goodness gracious. And for all of her outstanding work and service, the accolades pile to the sky and are much deserved, right? She just get a load of some of these, right? She was named the graduate of the last decade from Ball State University, as well as a distinguished Purdue University Fellow, has been recognized by UNCF for her commitment to children, and was named Indy's Best and Brightest for recognition in the field of education. She was recognized as the Breakthrough Woman of the Year for breaking barriers in her field. Most recently, she was given the state honor of International Educator of the Year by Global Indiana, and recognized for her achievement in education by the Center for Leadership Development. Additionally, the American Association of School Administrators awarded her the Women in School Leadership Award, as well as an honor from Ball State for outstanding alumni achievement. And she was chosen as Hoosier Fellow for the Tobias Executive Leadership Program. Finally, she had the distinct honor of working with both Dr. Ann McCarty and myself, helping middle school teachers and leaders from around the country back in the day. Now, that's the true award. That's right, Fearless Schools Podcast. We're joined by the one and only amazing superintendent, good friend, and stellar human being all around, Dr. Nikki Woodson.
Thank you, Drew. What a lead up. My goodness.
Yes, indeed. I need a break. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, listen, I can't wait to get started, because I knew some of that about you, right? I've known your career and all the accolades that you've piled up, but this is such a treat. That we get to talk. And there's a key question. Surviving in the superintendency, we have to think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, and food is part of that. What is your go-to food in times of challenge and or triumph?
The go-to food would have to be pasta, Drew.
Okay.
Pasta. That is one recipe to survive the superintendency, is really good pasta. Not any pasta.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So, and you're not being fusilli about that either.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Is there a specific noodle or sauce? Are you a red sauce person, or are you like a white sauce person? Or?
I am a multi-sauce person. It's really got to be a good homemade noodle, though. And it's really got to be mixed with a good homemade sauce. So whether that is a pesto sauce or an Alfredo sauce or red sauce, it all depends on the combination.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, that's good. You got to get those good noodles, the good carbohydrates to keep you energized throughout the day.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
Now, I don't make homemade pasta. I just eat homemade pasta. Let's clarify
that. Listen, it's important to respect and acknowledge the homemade aspect of things.
Yes.
Nothing processed. Okay, so speaking of processes and processed things, nothing is processed about the superintendency. So I'm always been curious, what initially attracted you to the superintendent role?
Sure. This is a story that would not be believable without proper documentation. And I do have the documentation, but I went to a local high school here in the Indianapolis area, and I made known my career goals to my school counselor very early on. So she wrote a letter of recommendation to my undergraduate pursuits, which ended up being Ball State. And actually, one of her letters helped me secure a full ride scholarship to Ball State. But in that letter, and I still have the letter today, she stated the accolades that I had from high school, but that I had a goal of being a public school superintendent. And when Nikki makes goals, she meets them.
There you go.
And that was when I was a high school student.
Wow.
So it was very, very young that I knew I wanted to be not just a school leader, not just a principal, but a public school superintendent. I had great models when I attended public schools all the way K through 12. And I knew from a very young age that that is what I wanted to do. So I'm quite literally living my dream.
That's awesome. So what was it about? I mean, not that you have to go all the way back, but if you want to, you can, because we're always interested in the origin story of our educational superheroes.
Sure.
What was it about the superintendency, or maybe what great model did you have that was like, yep, that's what I want to do at high school? Oh my gosh.
In high school. So I knew I had lots of experiences in high school. I was honored to be able to be a part of things like cadet teaching courses while I was in high school. Junior and senior year, I had enough credits that I did not need to go to school full day. So this was before work-based learning was even a term, but I went to a daycare facility for the second half of my day because they knew I wanted to go into education. And so I had lots of experiences with a wide variety of ages. I mentored and tutored elementary students, and I helped out with some after school activities at the middle school level.
Mm.
Those activities taught me that I loved all of the levels
Yeah.
within education, not just the young ones, not just the middle ones, that I loved all the levels. So I talked to a lot of people that was in my life, whether they were teachers or counselors or administrators. And I realized that one of the ways you can have an impact on all the levels within a K 12 school system was to be a school superintendent. I didn't have to
Yeah.
choose elementary or middle or high for my entire career, that I could have experiences in each of those, but that a superintendent got to touch and have impact on all of those levels. And that's what attracted me to the superintendency.
That's really cool. And it's interesting too, because I want to dig into this a little bit. You had a kind of a flexible schedule,
Yes,
and that flexible schedule allowed you to have some work-based experiences in education.
yes,
So how does that early experience, does that play a part in what you do today? Like, how does that
absolutely does.
influence what you do now?
It absolutely has direct influence on what I do and what the experiences that I create for students today,
Okay.
along with my team, of course. We know that I am a rare unicorn, if you will, that knew what I wanted to do very early on and stayed with that path.
Right.
Many students, including my own children, will explore various paths of careers and jobs, and that's okay. So we just need to be able to provide those experiences for students, whether they are one track and one goal minded like I was, or whether they need to explore lots of things before they find what fits them most and best as far as a career. So I think that the breadth of experiences that I now have a vision or have had for a vision with the 15 years I've been leading a school district, of giving my students from various ages. A lot of people think that those experiences need to begin in high school, but it's
Right.
much earlier. We need to start in upper elementary all the way through high school, providing those experiences for our students. And so I think that has definitely informed the programs and initiatives and strategies I've brought being a district leader.
No, that's awesome, and clearly, I'm forgetting the author who wrote this, but like it's not the experience that we have, but it's the reflection upon those experiences. Was it Dewey who said that?
I don't know, but I 100% agree with it.
Let's give it to him. Let's give it to Dewey. There you go. You got your goal,
Yes,
right? You've achieved your goal, the unicorn that you are. Right? You achieved it. So, what was like when you get into that position,
yes.
the superintendency? What's one big surprise that you had on day one, or that first when you were first stepping foot into it? What was a big surprise being in that position? You were like, "Oh gosh, I didn't even realize this was going to happen."
Absolutely. Back in May of this year, I was interviewed about my retirement on a local radio station. And one of the
Hmm.
questions was, what did day one of being a superintendent feels like? So I'm going to recall this conversation
Ah,
because I think the answer was surprising.
okay.
One, it being my goal of my entire career, my life. You think, oh, she's at the pinnacle, she's living her dream. But the feeling on day one and that initial feeling stepping into the superintendency was enormous weight. I felt the pressure. I
Mm,
felt the weight of being in charge of 17 school facilities, 12,000 kids, 1,600 employees. I felt the weight of creating futures on behalf of communities and students and families.
yeah.
So I think the responsibility and the weight of the position is what I felt initially, and just the desire to make it excellent at every single turn, no matter whether that was my oversight of transportation,
Mm.
whether that was my oversight of facilities, whether that was my oversight of teaching and learning curriculum instruction. At every turn, I felt the pressure to make it excellent because there was no time to waste, there was no lives to waste, and I just had to.
Man, I mean, I feel like that should be emblazoned on like every school district moniker. No time to waste and no lives to waste, isn't it? Yeah.
There's no lives to waste, but there, with that feeling, and that is a let's go get 'em mentality, but
Yeah.
that also comes with high blood pressure,
Yeah.
a lot of stress, the desire to be perfect because you don't think anything less than perfect is acceptable. So that does come with a lot of
Mm.
self-imposed stresses that, looking back early in my career as a superintendent, so if I went back 15 years,
Yeah.
I would tell myself to take some of that pressure off, that it's a journey and that journey is going to take time. And we're going to do the best with the knowledge that we have and the resources that we have at the time, knowing that we can always improve. So I would just take a little bit of pressure, keeping that mark of excellence,
Yeah.
but I would take a little bit of pressure off of my young superintendent self.
Yeah. When did you start to get to that point where you were like, hey, listen, I don't have to feel so much pressure? Was it like year 2, 3, 4? Like at what point did you get
It
from
was
under?
probably year 5 or 6.
Okay.
And, a couple of things that made an impact on that pressure for me. First, I was the first African American female
Mhm.
in my entire county superintendent.
Yeah.
So that had a pressure all by itself as a historic
Sure.
piece.
Yeah.
The other piece for me, I was the youngest superintendent in the state of Indiana.
Mm.
So young, first, with many demographic qualities. So I felt like, wow, I've got to, really do this thing very, very well. I don't have a long time to get my feet wet and learn the job. I got to come in and do it well.
Yeah.
So I think those two things added to the pressure. But I do think by year 5, I had established my expectations, my vision. I had created a team around me that had that shared vision and expectation, and just a tremendously supportive school board the whole way through. But there was a point in time that, it was either going to be a shorter superintendent
Mm.
career than 15 years, just based on the level of stress I self imposed on myself, or I needed to back down on that, the stressors I put on myself and create a longer career. And that's what I chose to do.
There you
That's
go.
why I did it. 15 years, same school district.
Yeah, goodness, and there's not enough pasta in the world to just, make
Not enough
everything feel better.
That's true. That is exactly right.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned, obviously, to kind of rewind the tape a little bit. So your vision,
Yes.
your very patient and approving school board, and then a team. So
Yes.
you said you assembled a team around you.
Yes.
So who, like, you don't have to name them by name, but how crucial was that team to your success, and how important is a team to the success of any superintendent?
Yeah, it is absolutely critical to the success of any executive leadership position. It's who you situate
Right.
yourself around as far as your team. But I have a really different philosophy. Some people think you have to align your team with people who are like-minded with you and
Mm,
operate the same, have the exact same leadership qualities and characteristics as you for it to be a harmonious team. And I think very, very differently about that. I think
okay.
we've got to have I think of it like a sports team. You don't want all defensive players.
Right.
You got to have offense, you got to have defense, you got to have people with different skill sets and qualities. You look for different stats with different players. You don't want all of the players on the same team to have the same stats
Right.
in the same areas or the same expertise. And I think about that as an executive leader. When you assemble your team, you have to look at a wide range of stats so that you've got coverage. I think that the team I create, hopefully they felt the same, but it needs to have discourse. It doesn't need to be everyone agrees with the superintendent 100% of the time. That would not have made us excellent in our work that we have done and our strategic planning goals that have been met. We have to have discourse. We have to push each other to think differently. And so I look for that in the team members that surround me closely.
Hmm.
And I think it's just a very, very important part of executive leadership is looking for those different ways of thinking, respectfully and professionally challenging each other around the team at appropriate settings, of course,
Yeah.
to push everyone to be better.
Yeah, and discourse, a lot of people think discourse is always harmonious, but
Right.
discourse can be coarse.
That's exactly right.
So knowing how to is that a skill for superintendents, to know how far you can push your team to the point of alliance or disharmony? You know what I mean? Like,
In that team, Drew, I would broaden that
okay.
to your staff because I think of my team as my executive leaders around me who help lead the district, but the staff, how far can you push the staff?
Mm,
Because as superintendent, the decisions you make just don't impact the layer or the administrative team under you. It impacts the whole staff. So I could have a great idea. Let's do this in all of our classrooms next year. And hey, operations team, I need you to put that into place.
right.
But how that then goes and impacts hundreds of staff members, I have to be aware of it. And if I'm not aware, I need my executive leaders to make me aware. Dr. Woodson, that is a great idea. But are
But
you aware that that's going to take away from the summer work they had to do preparing for facilities?
mm,
And it's really going to put a burden and a pressure on the operations team, X, Y, or Z. So that's why I think that discourse is so important for a superintendent to be open to that level of feedback constantly.
yeah, no, it really is. And at the beginning of the show, you talked about not making homemade pasta. And you actually do it. You do it with your team, right? Because if you think about it, like what makes it cook is you have structure. You can't just put noodles in just anything. You have to put it in a structured,
No,
vessel,
that's right.
and you have to put some heat to it. But you have to know just how much heat,
That's right.
and then you have to know when the noodles are al dente and when they've been overcooked. And in a lot
Yes.
of ways, that's what you do every day with your team. You're a constant watcher of the pot. There you go. So
Goal is to age that pot. Don't always get it right, but that's the goal.
that is right. That is right. And when to be kind to yourself as
Yes.
the head chef in the kitchen, if you will, in some ways. Because we talked about in another broadcast about psychological safety, right? And the ability to make mistakes. So along with that, what advice would you give for anybody who isn't in the superintendency right now? You've already given us so much great advice already. What other advice would you give for anybody who's just thinking about the superintendency?
Sure. I help mentor future building principals and future superintendents through some of my work and some of the advice I give them, because sometimes they're constantly thinking about that job they want to obtain. Or I'm finishing this degree and I'm just thinking about the job I really want to have. Stop thinking so much about that. You've got to think about it, but not so much, and really do amazing work in your current job. And that next job will take care of itself. And so I really do give that advice a lot. Sometimes when assistant principals have their eye on that principalship and that's all they're thinking about, and what do I need to do to get that principal job? Well, you need to be an amazing assistant principal.
Yep.
And that principal job will take care of itself. People will actually call you for that principal job if you are an incredible, knock it out of the park assistant principal.
Yep.
So really just doing excellent work in your current job can take care of itself with that future career aspiration that folks may have.
Awesome. So yeah, that's a great advice. Do a great job with what you're currently doing now. Yeah, just like an athlete, don't chase the statistics. Just go out there and like you said, be a player on the team.
That's it.
So that's the kind of the positive advice. Anything that's like either a current surprise, you talked about surprises on that day one of the weight and the pressure. Anything that continues to, now that you're a seasoned veteran of the superintendency, anything else that continues to surprise you on the day-to-day work?
I think that we all had that reset moment during the global pandemic. And as educators, it just impacted everything in ways no one had experience, knowledge, or expertise. And so I think coming out of that, people wanted to go back to the way things were, but it was a beautiful time to reimagine who we are. And so I think that that is a lifelong lesson I will take anywhere I go, is that constant opportunity to reimagine.
Yeah.
And being open to reimagining the way we do things, the way we go after it, the way we're preparing kids, what we're preparing kids for. But just it was a dark time, but a beautiful opening to reimagining how we think about education. The other piece I think that is constantly on my mind is that, when we're in a position, I was in mine for 15 years, which is a long time, but constantly looking for ways to refresh yourself. And I think complacency is easy to come into if you're in a position, whether that's a teaching position or an administrative position for over a decade, decade and a half, 2 decades, but constantly finding ways to refresh yourself. I remember it was maybe in year 6 or 7 coming out of that high pressure first part of my superintendency. And I thought, I am getting stuck in meetings with adults all day and in my office. And I have to break this mold because my joy comes from being with students in the classroom out in schools.
Yeah.
And so I tried a few different things. They weren't working. I tried to just put half days on my schedule to be out in schools, and it just seemed so superficial, or just superintendents just showing up randomly. And so I was in meeting with students at a rival at our high school, has 4,000 kids. So this is a big arrival. And I was talking to a group of young men, and they were telling me about some troubles they were having in class. And I was giving them some advice. And I remember the bell rang, and one of the kids, who I still don't know his name today, looked at me and he said, "Dr. Woodson, I hear what you're saying, but you don't understand because you've never walked in my shoes," and had his
Mm.
finger up while he was talking to me, not in a disrespectful way,
Hmm.
but just in a way to really make a point to me. And that at that time, the bell had rang. And so they're scattering, trying not to be late to class. But that sat with me in a really deep way.
Yeah.
And so I created this experience after that moment with that student, and kind of this rut I was in trying to get back into classrooms and schools, of being a day in the life of shoes around the district. And
Yeah.
so I took students from around the district, from all levels, from all ability levels. I took staff members, and I walked a day in their shoes. And so I took an E&L student who was a refugee from Burma, had zero English skills, and I walked a day in her shoes. And I took a high performing student at a middle level and walked a day in their shoes. I took a very high frequency office behavioral visit student who had lots of behavioral challenges, and walked a day in his shoes.
Mm.
And then I did staff members in the same way. And this took me about a year to do, because I'm taking an entire day to experience what life is like in our schools from these various lenses. And I learned so much
Yeah.
by those experiences. There is not any conference, workshop, or class I could have attended to teach me what I learned by walking a day in those various shoes. So that was just one small way over a course of a year that I chose professionally to refresh.
Yeah.
It changed systems that we put in place. It changed the way I led. It changed strategic direction for us. So
That's awesome.
high impact, low yield as far as time and commitment, but high impact as far as my leadership. So just I would really encourage leaders to constantly find ways to refresh, reset, because it can pay off in small or big ways.
Yeah, and clearly, not only did you have that innovative practice, but you then shared out with
Yeah.
others about those experiences too. So,
Yes.
because I think one of the ways that, well, gosh, everyone gets stuck is looking at just numerical data, just the
Correct.
quantitative. But you lived the qualitative experience with those students. Was everybody receptive to hearing that, or how did you share out those experiences? Like, hey, this is important, guys.
No, and that's one thing I did have to learn as a superintendent. You have to go in small doses. You get
Right.
excited about things, you want to big dose people, but you got to small dose people. So I small dose staff and those that work around me about the experience over a long period of time. I did do a formal presentation for the school board, of course, at the conclusion of it, but it's small doses of ideas and thoughts over time versus big doses that are more digestible for staff.
There you go. Yeah, and that was going to be kind of my next question. You kind of almost addressed it, but how do you, as someone who loves innovation, not only inward innovation, like innovating yourself and your practices, but innovation in terms of structures and processes in a superintendency, what advice would you give? How do you push innovation in a district or a community that is, well, let's say, afraid of change or afraid of innovation?
Mhm.
How do you, as a superintendent, push that forward?
Sure. Well, our community was extremely supportive in passing the state's largest referenda, total $575 million during my superintendency.
Mm.
That came from innovative ideas on what our schools could be and what our students could experience, but we needed extraordinary funding to make that happen.
Right.
And so to share that innovation, of course, taxpayers were not thrilled to say, "Oh, yes, please be innovative and raise my taxes." So
Right.
it took years of laying foundation, groundwork, having conversations, being open to collaboration on what that innovation was and what it looked like over time, along with lots of partners and stakeholders. So it's a shared creation of a vision that I think is super important to get the innovation launched and off the ground. If I said,
Right.
"Here's my vision for the innovation and here's what's needed in our schools," it would have never passed.
Mm.
Had to frame it and say, "Here's some thoughts I have about innovation, but what are your thoughts?
Mhm.
What do you want for our schools and our students' futures?" I hadn't thought about that. How could we work that in?
Right.
Or here's a challenge I would share with you about that innovation that you shared. It's got to be lots of conversation with a wide variety of stakeholders, and a leadership that's open and willing to collaborate two-way, not one way, to make innovation launch off the ground.
Yeah, it sounds like your ability to collaborate and discuss and create a shared vision is almost like a superpower that you
For sure.
have. But why is it that some superintendents and leaders feel pressure to be expedient? To
Sure.
like that because it seems like it could derail the superintendency.
Right. And I think there's lots of complexities and circumstances, Drew, within a district that could add to the challenging answer to why some superintendents may move faster on big initiatives than others. I had the luxury of time when I first became superintendent because we had amazing achievement results.
Hmm.
If the achievement results were tanked or extremely concerning, there may have been a different level of urgency to put some things in place. And so I
Okay.
think that's one idea of a complexity that could be there to create a faster urgency. The urgency for me when I stepped into this position were facilities,
Mm,
and the facilities were all of them in need of massive renovations, and we were in need of new school
okay.
spaces. And so that I could not have waited 10 years to develop and
Right.
work through things with the community. I had to act with a higher level of urgency there because the facilities were crying out for massive work. So
Well,
I
yeah.
think there's lots of things that create the timing aspect
Yeah.
for a school district leader for big initiatives.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just like what we say to students sometimes when they get in trouble for talking back to a teacher.
That's
It's like,
right.
hey, it's about timing and it's about tone,
100%
timing
true.
and tone. So interesting how it all
Yes.
kind of comes together, no matter who you're talking to. Speaking of the people, how do we attract people to the superintendency? Like,
Yeah.
who are you looking for? Like, what kind of characteristics do you think make somebody who is maybe trying to go into the superintendency?
I'm going to start with the first part, Drew, and it's so important. How do we attract people to executive leader of districts or even building level leadership, which we desperately still need to? It has to be from us as educators pouring into future educators. And that takes time. We're not paid to do it.
Hmm.
Another thing on our to-do list, but we have to mentor. We have to continue educating future educators and giving our time there. So that's why I feel so strongly about mentoring. We have to continue tapping on shoulders,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, teacher, I see you as a future teacher leader. Have you ever considered a department chair? Have you ever considered getting your administrative license?" Those taps on shoulders mean something to people, and we have to continue doing that. And the other thing we have to do that I preach all the time, we have to make what is joyful, what is powerful, what is our why about being in these positions known.
Yeah.
Public education is beat up constantly, nationally and at the state level. So it's our job to tell the story of the joy in these positions and the why we got in these positions in the first place and all the good things that are happening. So we've got to continue to tell the joyful story
Yeah.
because that's what'll combat the other side that folks are hearing.
Yeah. Where do you do that? What space do you use or spaces do you use to get that positive story out? Because I agree with you 110%.
Every platform that I can, and I probably agree to do more things than I should, but it's like this podcast, it's super important to tell a joyful story about the superintendency and that it can be survived successfully,
Hmm.
that I agreed to do this. I agreed to do this times 100 things because this is the way we tell our story. It's not just one method, it's not just one podcast, it's not just one interview. It's multiple things. And so that's why I say yes to so many things because it's a part of telling our stories across multiple platforms.
Right. Absolutely. Like you said, it's like the taps on the shoulder, like you mentioned.
Yes,
It's mentoring people, tapping them on the shoulder, and then also reminding people, even if you're not in this position, hey, this is what
that's
brings
right.
us. It should still be, no matter what challenges we have and what stresses the position and how much pasta we may need to eat,
That's right.
it is still the joy that should drive us forward.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
important for us to remember. Is how else have you survived the superintendency besides like the joy and the sharing and changing the narrative? What have you else have you done?
One of the lenses that I had the pleasure of having was having my own two children in the school corporation that I led. And so they started out in preschool and kindergarten when I was first superintendent. And having that lens of my own two kids
Hmm.
in the school system that I led to lots of powerful decision making because I want only the best
Right.
for my two kids, whatever class, group, grade, school, I wanted them to have the best. So I need all 12,000 to have access to the best.
Right.
And so having that lens of what would you want for your own child as you're leading a school corporation is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I use that a lot when I talk to staff.
Yeah. And you lived it. Like a lot of times we do say, what would you want for your own children? But they were literally in your own care in the school district. That is a
Yes.
powerful example. So goodness gracious. Anything else that you'd like to share about surviving the superintendency with the Fearless Schools podcast, Dr. Woodson?
Sure, Drew. At each level as a teacher, you've got kind of teacher colleagues and a cohort of folks that help usher you along. As a principal, you've got other district leaders and other principals to help usher you along. But there is a lonely feeling when you step into the superintendency because there's not this collegial group of other superintendents to
Hmm.
help usher you along
Ah,
within the same district or school corporation. So I would say that as that lonely feeling begins to creep in when folks take that first superintendent job, don't allow it to settle in. It's going to creep in because it's a job change, it's just a new dynamic of administration, but don't allow that loneliness to settle in.
yeah.
You've got to constantly reach out to colleagues, constantly be a part of professional organizations with other superintendents. Branch out of your state and be a part of national groups and organizations that help you be around other superintendents. There's a rich superintendent professional collegial group out there, but you do have to seek it. They won't always come and knock on your door and say, "How are you doing, superintendent, in your first year?" So go out and seek those professional opportunities. Don't feel like you have to stay in a lonely place at any time during a superintendent position.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. And it goes back. I keep bringing up making pasta, but I mean, if you're just the sole person watching the pasta go, that can be a very lonely
Yes,
experience. So bringing in other cooks into the kitchen, no, that's great advice. But listen,
absolutely.
we appreciate you sharing your time and your insights with us. So grateful, but please don't close the door on the pantry just yet. All right. So we've arrived at the part of the podcast that we call a problem of practice from someone out there in the classroom, schoolhouse, school district,
Okay.
someone who's just clamoring for a creative leadership solution. So here's the question. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right.
I hope I deliver.
Okay. All right. So, hello, Fearless Schools. I'm a principal of a high school and I'm interested in becoming a superintendent one day, but not sure if I can handle work life balance. How do superintendents do it all and keep life in the balance too? Oh,
What a great question. And that is, I think, for someone looking for the next career step, a wonderful reflection question to think about now versus when you're in that position thinking, how do I now gain balance?
mm,
So I think that this leader, whoever they are, has great foresight and a really, really rich reflection level at this current stage. I would say this: if you have not achieved work-life balance in your current position, whatever that is, it will not be achieved just because you change a job.
mm,
You have to really work on that area of your life in your current position
yep,
in order for you to have the skill sets, strategies in place, and support systems for that to continue to be a balance in your next or a higher level position. And that is one that I will be very vulnerable. I did not do well early in my career.
sure.
And I think I've alluded to that several times that I learned that well into my superintendency versus in previous administrative jobs. So I really would share that work life balance is a system that everybody has to create. And what that system is looks different for every person.
Yeah,
That looks different whether you're single or married, have kids, what age of kids those are, what your goals are. Are you going to school on top of being in school every day? Do you have other aspirations? So I think all of that, your faith, your family's
mm,
support structure and system, all of those dynamics help create what your balancing system needs to look like. But doing that in your current position, no matter what that is, and finding that balance will only help you in the next level of position.
yeah. I'm going to rewind that. So, listener, whoever asked this question, right? So, first of all, Dr. Woodson says thanks for asking the question now and not when you're in your position. But
Absolutely.
to make this kind of work-life balance change in your current position, right?
Yes.
Because it's about you on the inside, no matter where you are in your career trajectory. And then whatever system of work-life balance you have, create it, but it looks different from everybody.
That's right. And it may need to change over time. I changed what my work-life balance looked like
Hmm.
from when my kids were in elementary to when they were in high school to when they're in college. That all needs to be organic and look differently
Yeah.
and be figured out over time.
Yeah. And I think too, with this question comes, you got to love what you do.
Yes.
So what do you love? If you have to put the LOVE in it, what do
Yes.
you love about the superintendent?
I love big, messy,
Yeah.
complex problems to go in, investigate, dissect, create strategic planning around, then get a team on board with that strategic plan and then deploy it. And then
Yeah.
see those amazing results. That to me, which is big, big work and years of work, which is what I just described. But that to me is so joyful to see come to fruition.
Yeah.
I love tackling big, big stuff.
Oh, that's lovely. And messy stuff too.
Yes.
You got to
Yes.
love the mess.
Yes.
And be patient because that takes time. That takes time. Oh my gosh. Well, once again, big time thanks, Dr. Nikki Woodson. You're awesome, right? You're awesome. Our listeners laced up their boots and walked on the uncertain mountain of learning, looking for tacit handholds, and you guided them like a stellar superintendent Sherpa that you are.
Well, I was honored to be asked to be on this podcast. And as I shared, anytime I can share my craft or any nuggets that I've learned over the years, I'm more than happy to share. So thanks for asking me.
Oh, absolutely. Let's not let this be the last time.
All right.
All right, let's keep it going. Hey, Fearless Schools listeners, you did it. While others may have tuned out, you tuned in. All right, you tuned into another Fearless Schools podcast brought to you by Creative Leadership Solutions, and you should be proud of yourself. And as you sashay around the promenade with this podcast in your back pocket, you know what to do, right? Go to www.creativeleadership.net and also subscribe and share this podcast with anyone and everyone you know, right? Friends, fellow educators, people riding bikes on the sidewalk, social media influencers, just whoever, whenever you want to. And I promise you this, right? We're going to keep dishing out the good stuff. So with that, I'm Dr. Drew Tomlin, host of your Fearless Schools podcast, wishing you well and saying stay fearless on the bright road forward. Thanks again, Dr. Woodson.
Thank you.